Hello, I'm Natalie, and I'm going to tell you about my very first Norwegian cruise. It was on the Norwegian Star, going from Buenos Aires to Antarctica with several stops along the way from December 22nd, 2024 to January 5th, 2025. This cruise was the longest by double than any other cruise I'd been on. It was 2 weeks long, and I went with my husband as we celebrated our 15-year anniversary. It was a great way to spend Christmas and New Year's. I enjoyed it thoroughly. As this was my first Norwegian cruise, but my 15th cruise overall, with most being on Carnival and Royal Caribbean and one Princess cruise before, I noticed some things about Norwegian that were quite interesting, and I thought I'd share them in case anyone else is going on their first Norwegian cruise. Of course, some of these may vary depending on what ship. I'm going to break it into 4 areas. I'll tell you a little bit about the technology, my thoughts on the room, food, and the onboard experience. So from a technology perspective, I actually felt like I stepped back many, many years in cruise time because of how the app was. Now, when we went on this cruise, they just switched to a new app, Norwegian did, and some people on the ship told us the old app was better and let you do a few more things. But what I thought was interesting about this app compared to, especially Carnival, Royal Caribbean, you could only see the activities for the current day. I'm used to being able to see what's happening for future days and planning things out. But with Norwegian, it was one day at a time, see what's going on. And it wasn't very interactive, nor was it in chronological order of the activities happening on board in that day. I thought that was extremely bizarre to not have a chronological order view. And by not interactive, what I mean is I'm used to on other ships being able to select which activities of the day that I want to do and then viewing a screen that shows just the things that I selected so that I'm not constantly looking at everything, remembering what I want to do. Of course, and I'll mention this when I get to onboard experience, part of the reason might be Norwegian had so many fewer things to do. It actually wasn't that hard to keep track with what I wanted to do. The other thing about the app that I thought was interesting was the dining venues. Their hours were not included when you would go to look at each venue, nor was the menu included for all of the restaurants. So each day, to find out whether I wanted to go to a main dining room for dinner or the buffet, I would go walk to the dining room at some point during the day where the menu for that night would be posted outside, and I'd look there. I'm used to being able to see that information in the app. Not a big deal. Mind you, none of these are deal breakers. I will enjoy every cruise I am on, no matter what. I'm just pointing out things I noticed about Norwegian that surprised me a little bit or that were different from my usual cruise experiences. From the room perspective, I really liked that outside of the door, there were these different settings you could put a little knob on to say, do not disturb or clean my room, or I forgot what the other 2 were. But I thought that was a clever way to be able to communicate with the room steward. And there were many days where we said, we don't need our room cleaned, just give us some clean wash towels and take out the trash. And that would be it for us for many days. I hope I helped make our steward's life a little bit easier. The other thing, I was a little sad in advance to see that Norwegian does not allow door decor the way the other cruise lines do. I had bought this magnet to put outside our door just to make our room a little bit more customized and personalized, but I did not put it out there because the rules said no door decor. Now, what I noticed is plenty of people had door decor and this rule was not enforced, which was a common theme I found about all the rules on the ship, not enforced. The other thing I made a note of, the bed was not quite as comfortable as the beds on our last few cruises. Before that, that was my 4th cruise of 2024. 2 of them were on Carnival, 1 was on Royal Caribbean. All 3 of those had a much more comfortable bed. Not completely uncomfortable, just wasn't as comfortable as the others on Norwegian. Okay, moving on to food. From a food perspective, I thought the menu was varied enough for lunch and dinner time. Breakfast, though, got old pretty quickly when you have the exact same options. It would have been nice to have, for example, on Carnival, I love the sea day brunches that they have where you have a different menu on sea days than port days. It's kind of nice. So not a lot of breakfast variety. My husband and I don't eat pork, and he has a slight allergy to eggs. So if you don't eat pork and you don't eat eggs, but you wanted protein, you struggled a little bit at breakfast. Unless you wanted a Shaq's Big Chicken. Nope, wrong cruise line. Okay, the other thing I noticed in the dining room that I thought was especially puzzling was the lack of labels on certain dishes, on most of the dishes for lunch and dinner. So I often found myself having to ask a person who worked there, does this dish have pork in it? And they would have to go check with someone. Clearly, you could have labels, especially on a cruise dealing with people from all over the world with different eating styles. I thought it would make sense to label the main proteins in each dish or key allergens. I thought that was very odd to not have labels. On the positive side, the 24-hour restaurant, O'Sheehan's, had chicken wings. You could get chicken wings 24 hours a day. My oldest daughter loves chicken wings. I thought of her so often when we'd go there and say, oh, Ellie would love it if she could come here and get some of these chicken wings. But we left the kids behind. And as I mentioned, no sea day brunch and no tea time. That's the other thing I really enjoy on Carnival ships is the tea time on sea days, to get some little treats and scones and clotted cream. It's a nice touch. So I kind of miss that a little bit. Last category, onboard experience. I only spent $15 in the casino on this 15-day cruise. Why? There's only a smoking casino. The one day I went, the first sea day, I went fairly early in the morning. It wasn't crowded. I didn't even see anyone smoking, but the smell was too strong for me. So I kind of was covering my nose a little bit, but I did not last long in the casino because I just couldn't take the smell, and therefore I never went back. I had planned on giving Norwegian a lot more of my money in the casino, but I couldn't get over the smell since there was no non-smoking option. The other thing I thought was interesting, I went to guest services to have them cut a hole, use the hole puncher in my key card so that I could attach it to my lanyard. And they don't do that on Norwegian. I'm used to that on Carnival and Royal Caribbean, but apparently Norwegian does not do a hole in the key card. So now I know for next time to bring a lanyard that has a little sleeve. Not enough seating. Oh my goodness. This was probably the most annoying thing on the ship because perhaps it was such a nice itinerary going to Antarctica. People wanted to be able to look out at the water most of the day. We were constantly seeing whales, you'd occasionally see penguins, you saw icebergs. Now, where would people sit to look out the window? In the buffet. There weren't many other indoor places on the ship to be able to see outside. Whereas I found out if we had gotten the princess ship I wanted to Antarctica, it did have viewing spaces that were not in the dining room to look at the view. But anyway, that cruise timing didn't quite work for us, even though I watched a video about it and it looked amazing. So people would sit in the dining room, taking up chairs, not eating. There were signs on every table saying when you were done eating to please leave, and it suggested where you might go to play cards or read a book. But again, that was not enforced. People were not considerate enough to do that. My husband and I, oftentimes when we get food from the buffet, we then have to take it to our room due to lack of seating in the dining room. And that was at almost any time we went there. We just could not often get a seat, probably about half of the times. The other thing I thought was very odd, I felt harassed by the phone calls and voicemail messages encouraging us to buy Cruise Next dollars or credit. It happened way too often. It should not have happened that often. Stop leaving me voicemail messages and making me check voicemail just to hear your ad about buying Cruise Next credit. On the other hand, something I did like, whenever there were games such as the love and marriage game or some of the other games where people participate, I thought they gave really nice participation prizes to everyone who participated. It looked much nicer than anything I've seen on any other ship, so that was nice. Partially, I don't know if you'll call this a good thing or a bad thing, but there were not that many activities happening during the day, as I mentioned earlier about the app. So I had ample time to relax on this ship, to walk around, to dance on the balcony while looking for whales, because there simply weren't that many things to do during the day. But I will say, when there were things to do, they were amazing. I really enjoyed the small amount of onboard entertainment there was, such as the lectures about Antarctica and Shackleton and the mammals you would see. The port talks about each place were good to even give us ideas of what to do if we didn't take a Norwegian excursion, which we only did one excursion. Anything else we did was not through Norwegian, and we saved a lot of money that way. There was one of the nighttime shows included this group of dancers that danced tango, and they also did gaucho dancing. And during the days, a few days, they gave lessons. So my husband and I attended a tango dance lesson. That was really cool. There were Spanish lessons on the ship. They were very basic, more basic than my Duolingo. My years of Duolingo helped me learn enough to where it was more advanced than what they were doing on the ship. There was an illusionist at night. That was quite nice as well. So we didn't go to all of the nighttime shows, but we did catch the ones that were interesting looking. And we enjoyed what we went to. There was one show where I had the time wrong, and I got there maybe 5 minutes before it started, and we were sitting on the edge of the front row and couldn't see from that angle. The Christmas trees were blocking the way a little bit. So we ended up leaving, because why sit there for 45 minutes if you cannot see? Looking at my notes, I think that's about it. That wraps up my first cruise on Norwegian. What I didn't mention, but I'll mention it because I've actually since heard of this happening a lot with Norwegian, canceling ports. Our cruise originally had a couple of extra port stops in Chile, but the Chilean ports, both of them were canceled well in advance, which is much better than folks who get to final payment and then have ports canceled. Or what I've even heard of is sometimes the ship cannot go to Antarctica because of weather or whatever. But I'm so glad we were able to go to both of the locations in Antarctica that we planned on going to. They were both magnificent. I really enjoyed this cruise, the experience. It was more relaxing because there was less to do. We spent less money on this 2-week cruise than we've spent on 5-day cruises, because we're not really big drinkers and we didn't spend anything except that $15 in the casino. So overall, Norwegian Star, I enjoyed it. I would do it again. I now know a little bit more of what to expect when cruising Norwegian. I hope you do too.